Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Monday the 10th of March in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, Donald Trump deflects concerns about recession risks as his on-again, off-again tariff policies rattle markets.
Mark Carney says Canadian tariffs will stay until the US shows respect as he wins the race to lead the country.
Plus, an identity crisis 80 years in the making. We have a special report on Germany's struggles to jumpstart growth and restore competitiveness as the political centre shrinks.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
President Donald Trump has sought to sidestep growing concerns about the risk of a US recession as his policies continue to sap market confidence. The latest insight into how the US leader views the economy comes as his team increasingly pivots to a no pain, no gain message, with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent claiming America needed some detox to wean itself off dependence on public spending. Asked on Fox News' Sunday Morning Futures whether he's expecting a recession this year, President Trump said this.
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time. It takes a little time.
Trump's latest Fox News comments come after Fed Chair Jerome Powell on Friday acknowledged increased uncertainty in the US outlook, while also saying the economy remains in a good place. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 index has wiped out all of its gains since Trump was re-elected president.
The concerns about the US economy and the impact of a growing global trade war comes as Chinese tariffs on a slew of American farm products officially came into effect. China remains a key export market for largely Republican states in the Midwest Farm Belt, and the tariffs range from 10 to 15% on a long list of items, including grains, proteins, cotton and fresh produce. In a separate move, Beijing also imposed retaliatory tariffs on a range of Canadian agricultural goods that will come into effect on the 20th of March. The move comes after Canada imposed tariffs last year, including a 100% levy on electric vehicles and 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium from China.
The tariffs will be another headache for Mark Carney as he won the race to become Canada's next Prime Minister and pledged to keep his government's retaliatory tariffs on US goods. The former Bank of Canada and Bank of England governor will take over from Justin Trudeau after winning the contest to lead the country's Liberal Party with nearly 86% of the vote. The victory comes as Trump's decision to impose US tariffs on Canada has been met with patriotic fury and widespread boycotts of American goods. In his acceptance speech, Carney said he would protect the country's economy and sovereignty.
The Canadian government has rightly retaliated and is rightly retaliating with our own tariffs that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here in Canada. My government will keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect.
The transfer of power from Carney from Justin Trudeau is expected to take place within days, and it's possible he will call a national election soon after.
Well, President Trump says that he has largely lifted an intelligence sharing ban that he imposed on Ukraine after his public row with President Volodymyr Zelensky. The apparent reversal comes as US and Ukrainian officials prepare to meet on Tuesday in Saudi Arabia in a bid to restore ties, including the possible resurrection of a critical minerals deal. Speaking to reporters, Trump said that he expects Zelensky to make a natural resources deal with the US.
I think they will sign the minerals deal, but I want them to want peace.
Trump's administration argues that the proposed deal on critical minerals represents a US economic commitment to Ukraine's security as Trump presses Zelensky to agree to a ceasefire with Russia. The comments come as one of Trump's closest confidants, Elon Musk, called for a US exit from NATO, posting online that, quote, "it doesn't make sense for America to pay for the defence of Europe."
UK pay growth is at a 4-year low ahead of the government's tax on employers coming into effect. The Recruitment and Employment Confederation survey shows starting pay growth has deteriorated to levels last seen during the COVID pandemic. Bloomberg's James Wilcock has more.
companies warned higher taxes would feed through into lower wages. The RAC's data suggests that's taking place. They also reported a decline in job postings and hiring activity. And with Britain's official economic statistics under review, the recruiting lobby's survey is one of several being monitored by the Bank of England for signs of underlying cost pressures. In London, James Woolcock, Bloomberg Radio.
UK civil servants could be asked to quit with pay rises capped for senior officials if they fail to meet performance targets. It's part of the government's plan to fundamentally reshape Whitehall using artificial intelligence to make it more productive. Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden told Sky News' Trevor Phillips the plans may involve redundancies.
I think Boris Johnson said he'd get rid of 90,000. The later Conservative government said 66,000. What happened after that? Hiring went up. The state has to reform. Now, some of this is about the number of central civil servants. What I'd like to see...
so there could be a reduction in the headcount?
There could be.
Pat McFadden there. Also, he signalled plans to reform the UK's welfare system to get more people back to work in Britain. There were more than 500,000 civil servants at the end of last year, a third more than in 2016.
Those are our top stories on the markets. We saw equities drop and treasuries rise on growth concerns in the United States. So a risk-off start to Monday's trade. S&P 500 futures are down by 0.5% after dropping by over 3% last week. Treasuries have been rallying. The 2-year is 2 basis points lower in yield this morning. The US dollar slightly stronger. Crude oil falling again today. Brent crude's down by 0.5% after Donald Trump warned again on that transition period ahead. In Asia, we're seeing the Hang Seng down by 1.9%. The tech index in Hong Kong down by 2.7%.
Now, in a moment, we'll bring you more on Donald Trump and what he had to say about the state of the US economy. Plus, can Germany's next government really reverse its economic decline, the decline that we've seen in recent years? We'll get to those, though. There was another story that caught our eye this morning, a really interesting deep dive.
Yeah, our colleague Patrick Gillespie in Buenos Aires went to meet the man who made the custom chainsaw that Javier Milei gave to Elon Musk, of course, used to symbolise his cost-cutting efforts. Javier Milei has also used one of these as well, or brandished one, I should say, rather than necessarily use it. Mariano de Tea is the man who makes these chainsaws. He does it in his one-bedroom apartment, and at Milei's request, he's now working on one for Donald Trump. It's a fascinating conversation, an insight into he describes himself as an artist.
Yes.
The man who makes these chainsaws.
Doesn't take any money either for the creation of these chainsaws. And they have been, a hugely potent symbol, haven't they, for what both of these governments want to do. Yeah,
look, it's a really interesting, I suppose, insight into someone who's now created a symbol that's become so important politically. De Tea does say that he voted for Milei and supports his efforts to turn around Argentina's economy, but doesn't identify himself as a libertarian or a Peronist or any other political banner as well. Each of the chainsaws costs him about $500 in expenses that he tends to cover himself.
Yeah, but it was also fascinating that he said that he wouldn't want the chainsaws to become a symbol of cuts, of making people suffer, maybe lose their jobs or lose their incomes or livelihoods. He says that he sort of wants it to be a positive symbol for necessary reforms, at least when he was talking about Argentina. But look, the sort of reporting that you can read about this morning on the Bloomberg terminal and on our website.
Well, let's bring you more now on Donald Trump's latest comments on the US economy after the market jitters that we've seen. Our senior editor, Bill Ferries, joins us now for more. Bill, Donald Trump talking now about a period of transition for the economy. He wouldn't be drawn, as we just heard, on the risk of a recession. Is this an admission from the US president about the effects of his policies?
It definitely seems to be a shift in messaging from the White House, and basically an acknowledgement that it's not going to be super smooth sailing if they really continue to go forward with these policies of putting tariffs on trade partners, but also putting them on, taking them off, putting them back on again. The unpredictability has rattled markets at this point almost as much as the actual policies themselves. So, yeah, Donald Trump said he would hate to predict things like a recession, but he said there's going to be some transition. What we're doing is a big deal. You heard his Treasury Secretary saying that the U.S. economy needs to, he used the word detox from public spending. So I think there's a realization there's going to be a big impact. Donald Trump has always been someone who looked at the stock market. I think he's also trying to say, maybe I'm not going to pay as much attention to the stock market, although I think the market maybe doesn't quite believe that yet.
In that Fox News interview, he also talked about Ukraine. Are there signs of any compromise or any discussions with President Zelensky?
Yeah, I mean, he seems to continue to think that they're going to reach a deal. It could come as soon as this week. We don't really know a lot about the details of that agreement, that critical minerals agreement, how much money might be raised, how it's going to be governed in terms of the use of it. But he has said that, he thinks he seems to be acknowledging the walk back that we've seen from Zelensky in terms of saying he wants to have peace and work with the U.S., and Trump seems to be open to that.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump's also having an effect on policies outside of the US. His policies have been a central focus of Mark Carney's successful campaign. He's now going to be Canada's next Prime Minister. What should we be expecting in terms of his approach to the White House?
Well, Mark Carney is already pushing back. If anyone thought that he was going to fold under the tariff pressure, he said that Canada's tariffs are going to stay in place. The ones that are there will remain until the U.S. starts treating Canada with more respect. In terms of the situation he's inheriting, this is a guy who was at the Bank of England during Brexit. He was at the Bank of Canada, of course, during the global financial crisis. So probably as strong a resume as you could hope to have going into this very unpredictable situation with the U.S.
Yeah, Bill, thank you so much for being with us this morning and for those explanations. The latest then from the Trump White House. Our senior editor, Bill Ferries.
Now, Germany's Conservatives and Social Democrats are moving closer to forming a coalition, announcing over the weekend they deepen talks over joining forces in a new government. They face massive challenges, though, to restart growth after 2 years of contraction. They also have to boost defence spending and face the risk of trade tariffs from Donald Trump. Joining us from Berlin for more is Bloomberg's Chris Reiter, who's written a book with his colleague Will Wilkes on the subject called Broken Republic, the Inside Story of Germany's Descent into Crisis. Chris, great to have you with us this morning. Can you bring us up to date on the coalition talks? How close are the parties to a deal?
Well, this weekend they moved to the second stage of talks, which was sort of a formality, really, because it's the only possible outcome for a centrist government between Friedrich Merz's Conservatives and the Social Democrats. So on Saturday they had an exploratory paper, which was largely criticized, to be honest. And so the next stage, though, is going into really detailed talks, and that's probably still weeks away before an agreement comes about. And that's where the tension really will start.
But Friedrich Merz has also indicated that he wants to unleash a massive spending program for infrastructure and defense, abandon years of austerity in Germany. Is this being seen as the sort of turnaround that Germany needs?
Well, it's definitely a very critical time. I mean, Germany has for years obviously underinvested in infrastructure and its defense. Like it's hardly invested in defense, at least not up to NATO standards. And so it needs money. I mean, so that's definitely important. It's a step in the right direction. It's a question of then how this money is invested. And there's a lot of risk involved in that project, because in order to get this spending package through, he's using the old government. So basically the parliament that has been voted out of office. And he needs to get the Greens on board still. And it's a risky situation, because if this doesn't work out, it will be used by the far right and the fringe to gain more support.
Chris, as you chronicle in your book, Germany's been in and out of crisis for the last 20 years. What makes this period any different?
I think there's a different quality to the crisis that Germany faces right now. I mean, you just saw that in the federal election a couple weeks ago, where 7 parties were vying for the seats in parliament. Only 5 made it in. But the fact that 7 parties had a viable chance to get into government, which that wasn't the case decades ago. There was always this political stability within Germany with like the 2 main parties, the Social Democrats and the CDU dominating politics. That's no longer the case. The SPD, the Social Democrats, is in 3rd place. The AfD is in 2nd place. They doubled support. So the political fragmentation that Germany faces is a risk, because when there's fragmentation in politics, then Germany needs coalition governments in order to function. And so you have unstable coalition governments, which we saw in the last government under Scholz, which had 3 parties. And so the ability for politics to act and to kind of rally the populace together gets more and more difficult. I mean, we're seeing that already in the talks right now over the spending package, where the Greens are sort of putting conditions over their support for this package. The SPD already has imposed quite a lot of policies on the exploratory talks in the coalition. So that's the risk. So it is for us, there's definitely a different feel about the crisis that Germany faces now than how it has faced in the past. And on top of that, you have crisis in every major sector, basically, from autos to energy.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.